Hello everybody and welcome back to our lecture series. I'm Ted, your host, and for this lecture we're going to examine agriculture in East Asia. In our last lecture we examined the hunter-gatherer societies. We looked at peoples like the Sami, the Aborigines of Australia, and we also just did a broad overview of what exactly hunter-gatherer life, the life of a hunter-gatherer was like. We also looked at the Polynesians and the settlement of the islands of the Pacific. We examined Lapita culture. We examined the very intricate and ultimately successful maritime and navigation traditions that were developed by the Polynesians. In this lecture, we're going to focus more on agriculture in East Asia and agriculture in the Polynesian islands. And to begin with, let me just start by saying that food production and farming had a very long tradition in Asia, in East Asia, and it really begins in southern China, in the Yangtze Valley, a little before 7,000 BCE. Now there is a chance that agriculture started earlier in China, but further research is still needed to definitely indicate when it began. What we do know is that by 6,000 BCE, millet was being cultivated in the Wangho Valley of northern China. By 5,000 BCE, it was established over the vast majority of East Asia. In Southeast Asia, rice and root cultivation became key to fostering sedentarism or permanent settlements. Taro and yams, those are those are tubular foodstuffs, food crops. They will become crucial to the settlement of peoples in the offshore islands of Asia, in what we will call Polynesia. Now, rice was the essential crop of southern and eastern Asia. It still features prominently in the diets of the people living there, and rice in general is prominently featured in the diets of many people around the world. We've spoken of African rice that was crucial to the development of sedentary states, of commercial states, and just urban settlements in general in West Africa along the inland Niger River Delta, and in East Asia it will be equally important. Now, botanists believe that wild rice and Asian millet are descended from older strains from the Himalayan mountains that developed at the end of the Ice Age. The first form of rice to be domesticated may have been a shallow water variant that thrived in the alluvial swamps where there was enough water to stimulate the growth of the rice. It is from there that domestication first occurred under the seasonal flooding of regions of East Asia. Now, the seasonal flooding relieved the need to prepare fields for rice cultivation. Rice cultivation thus would have originated by people living in low-lying, seasonally flooded areas who were already subsisting on wild rice strands. Now, rice cultivation would have resulted from a variety of instances, ranging from rapid population growth to climatic change to other factors that are unaware to us. Now, the origin of rice is still really unknown to us. We don't really know that much about it. Now, the Yangtze region of China provides the earliest known sites of rice cultivation that we know of. This area is humid, it's semi-tropical, and it was wetter before 6,000 BCE. During this period, the Yangtze supported extensive networks of wetlands where wild rice thrived. Now, agriculture developed in China in two zones. The northern zone is where millet was cultivated and rice was cultivated in the south. Now, the two contrasting agricultural regiments would really lead to sharp divides in Chinese diets that still persist to this day. Now, had the climate warmed in the southern zone, wild rice collectors made the leap from foraging wild rice to cultivating wild rice. And this occurred between 7,200 and 5,500 BCE. Now, the Pendushan site in the Middle Yangtze Valley was a community of rice farmers who thrived between 6,500 and 5,800 BCE. And this was a large settlement. And during this era, rice cultivation was spreading rapidly through southern China. The scenario went as such. Local rice foragers introduced strains of wild rice into new wetlands to increase their own food supply. That's the scenario that we get for the adoption of domesticating wild rice. Now, in the process of expanding the range of wild rice, they began to actively cultivate rice and domesticate it. The process spread rapidly throughout Asia, throughout East Asia and Central Asia. By 5000 BCE, rice cultivation was a mainstay of many settlements. Now, we track this development through a unique but widely distributed ceramic vessel with a winding cork. Within 2,000 years, much more sophisticated agricultural cultures would flourish throughout southern China. Now, rice production now included large irrigation schemes, which involved the control and the movement of water. It required cooperative leadership to accomplish this. By 3000 BCE, these communities were led by elite individuals we surmise that they may have been kin leaders whose primary function was controlling trade and organizing the irrigation of agricultural fields. Now, in the Wangho River Valley of the north of northern China, at the end of the Ice Age, wild plants like millet became very important. In the Wangho, farming was dry, and the landscape was dry, and farming and survival really depended on the seasonal rainfall. Now, the environment was much colder, and the soil was productive enough to cultivate cereals. Now, the soil was easily workable with a simple digging stick. There was no need to utilize more sophisticated resources to cultivate the soil. The people there began to experiment with growing wild millet, which soon became the dominant food crop in their society. By 4800 BCE, the Anshan culture was flourishing over much of northern China. Now, this culture was heavily invested in agriculture, and the area was comparable in size to the area of Mesopotamia or Egypt at around the same time. Now, the communities were self-sufficient, and they built river terraces, and these terraces were high enough to avoid flooding and made the maximum use of the fertile floodplain soil. Now, by 3200 BCE, the urban civilizations, the core urban civilizations of ancient China begin to appear, and these would be the Yangshao, and these cultures these settlements, they begin to develop the unique character traits of Chinese culture. Something here. Now, something in Chinese culture and Chinese history was to develop that was very different from the other societies, and this would be accompanied by a very naturalistic art style, and the pottery that followed too. The pottery that the culture created allowed for the steaming of foodstuffs, which is still the basis of much of Chinese cuisine today. Now, linguists believe that the Yangshao also lent some elements of their speech to contemporary Chinese culture and to the later cultures that would arise in China. Now, the Yangshao were not alone in the north of China. There were other cultures flourishing as well. Another prominent culture flourishing in northern China at the time would be the Longshao, who developed a flourishing culture and flourishing settlements sometime between 4000 and 3200 BCE. And they also adapted irrigation and rice cultivation from southern China. Now, in China, we see much more elaborate and wealthier farming cultures, which laid the foundation for the later Chinese civilization. Now, the emergence of people of real social power who were in charge or who were charged with organizing this agriculture becomes a permanent feature of these societies. We also see the first hints at the tremendous regional diversity between North and South China. Now, we do not know when rice cultivation truly began in Southeast Asia. It is thought that a broadly rice growing culture emerged over a very wide area with extensive trade networks that linked the offshore islands to the mainland. Now, people began to travel to these areas. To these areas, to these offshore islands and to Australia, sometime around 50 to 40,000 years ago, and many of them headed towards Australia, New Guinea, and of course the Solomon Islands. By 7,000 BCE, New Guinea islanders were cultivating root crops on a small scale. Now, we know this because of the remnants of drainage channels in the highlands. Sometime between 5,000 and 2,000 BCE, taro and yam cultivation, as well as activities like forest clearing, became permanent fixtures on these islands, became permanent fixtures of these societies, of these cultures. And we also have records and really archaeological remnants of the changes in the natural vegetation and the creation of garden-like environments on these islands. And of course, all of these would have been created by the people to sustain themselves through their form of agriculture, through their form of cultivating preferred crops, preferred staple crops. Now, an important development, and this, and let me just backtrack a little bit, but this cultivation, the cultivation of yams and taros, these tubular vegetables, this would play an important role, a crucial role in the settlement of the Pacific Islands, as we stated in our previous lecture. Now, the cultivation of taro and yams spread across the islands of Polynesia. They spread to the Bismarck Archipelago, which lies off the coast of New Guinea, and this marked the first appearance of humans on the islands of Melanesia and Polynesia. These islands are biologically impoverished. The early settlers needed to bring in food crops to sustain habitation. Taro and yams, they were perfectly suited to be the staple crops brought over to sustain human population, human settlement on these islands. They easily stored food, and because they were so easily stored, they were able to be transported over great distances and then introduced into new environments, new biological environments. Now, as early as 1600 BCE, a sea-based culture emerged in Southeast Asia and in the Southwest Pacific. And this was centered on the Bismarck Archipelago. And this is the Lapita culture that we spoke of in our last lecture. Now, the Lapita culture spread rapidly, and this was motivated by trade. In the Bismarck Islands, there are important outcrops of obsidian, and obsidian will become a prized material for tool making. And again, these are people making stone tools. This trade, the trade in obsidian and the spread of the trade in seashells into the Pacific would facilitate and really encourage the dispersion of human settlements and the dispersion of humans throughout the islands of Polynesia. Now, what would emerge would be an enormous series of trade routes that connected all the islands of the Pacific, and as we spoke of in our last lecture, the Lapita developed an ocean-going double-hull canoe. These canoes were not very good sea-going vessels, but they were stable and they made for easy trips, as it were, easy trips to these islands. They were essentially hollowed-out tree trunks used to travel on the water. It was really the culmination of simply tethering two tree trunks and equipping them with an outrigger that resulted in the vessel being more sturdy and more capable of sailing on the seas. It allowed for easy access on the seas and easy access to these islands. Now, the double-hull canoe also had a greater carrying capacity, which meant that you can now carry more people, more supplies, and more trade goods. Now, this innovation allowed the Lapita to go first out into the Pacific and out of the sight of land, which is a testament to true blue water sailing. They were able to safely return home after going out into the sea. They developed these navigation skills that allowed them to confidently go out into the sea, knowing that they would return to land, that they would either find land or they would be able to return where they came from. Now, the Pacific was dangerous. It was a major biological barrier to movement. The voyages of these sailors were more than 600 miles. And at various stretches of time on the Pacific, they would be out of sight of land for more than 600 miles. They were navigating to these very small islands in a very vast ocean. And this required greatly sophisticated navigational methods, ways of finding their way safely to point A, and from point A, I should say, to point B. Now, the Lapita developed these skills. They knew the sea intimately. They lived close to the ocean. They knew how to navigate using the stars, as we spoke of in our last lecture. They knew how to set their course using the sun. They knew when the planets aligned, how the waves bounced off the shore. And they were using skill sets that they passed down orally from generation to generation as they left from island to island. They learned how to find land, but of equal importance, they learned how to return to the starting point when the need arose. And that is a very important, in any sort of journey, any sort of venture, you need to know how to get back to home if something doesn't go right. And that was a great a skill set that these sailors learned. It was a great advancement in human society and human development, voyaging out of the sight of land, storing surplus foods, and developing a sophisticated ocean-going vessel. Those three factors enabled the settling of the Pacific. Now, the settlement of Polynesia, the settlement of these offshore islands, was held up until domesticated, easily transferable crops and animals could be carried to these locations. As I stated earlier, the islands of Polynesia are biologically impoverished. We talked about it in our last lecture. It took the introduction of food crops and animals, animal livestock, as well as developing sophisticated hunting and fishing techniques to harness the abundant marine life resources of the Pacific to allow the Polynesian to survive in their new homes. Now, they did this deliberately, not by accident. They had to do it. We don't know whether they did this migration was motivated by either discord or overpopulation or simply a curiosity of what lies beyond the horizon. But this was a deliberate move by the Lapita culture and their descendants to spread out, to fan out across the Pacific. Now, with the settling of the Pacific, the great diaspora of modern humans, Homo sapiens, ends. The phenomenon that had begun more than 100,000 years ago comes to an end with the settling of the Pacific. So a great accomplishment accompanied by a closing of a chapter in human development. Hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this lecture. When we come back, we will continue our discourse on Southeast. We're going to be back. We're going to be going right back into Southeast Asia. But when we come back, we will continue our discourse into Asian civilization, into Asian history. I'm Ted, and I'll see you guys next time.